In the fiery hills of Judea, where thunder cracks against the bones of ancient cliffs, a young man once walked with a heart ablaze. His name was John, son of Zebedee, brother of James, but among the 12, he was called the Son of Thunder. Bold of spirit, fierce in word, and unafraid of fire, he burned with the zeal of a warrior and the passion of a storm. But storms do not last forever. From the days of sharp tempers and consuming ambition, John's journey would lead him into the silent heart of divine love. He was there at the Transfiguration, when heaven kissed the mountain. He leaned against the chest of the Messiah at the Last Supper, listening to the heartbeat of God. He stood by the cross when others fled, and ran to the empty tomb before dawn's light broke the sky. Yet the path was not easy. It wound through jealous rivalries, sacred visions, and moments of unbearable silence. From the shores of Galilee to the heights of Patmos, his soul would be carved by revelation and shaped by love until he no longer thundered, but whispered truths that would echo through eternity. This is the tale of John, the son of thunder, a disciple transformed, a witness of glory, the apostle who looked upon the end and still believed in the power of love. Prepare to walk the line between heaven and earth. The journey of John begins now. Chapter 1. The Sons of Thunder. In the wind-tossed villages along the Sea of Galilee, where the cries of fishermen mingled with the splash of nets and the scent of salt and sweat, two brothers carved out a life from water and toil. James, broad-shouldered and fierce-eyed, and John, the younger, whose gaze burned with a quiet fire. Sons of Zebedee, sons of thunder. They were men of action, not of whispers. When storms rose, they faced them. When others hesitated, they charged forward. And when the call of a new prophet began to stir in the Judean wilderness, it was not fear that stirred in them. It was fire. The brothers first heard of the baptizer through whispers passed from boat to boat. A man clothed in camel hair, crying out in the desert, "Prepare the way." Others mocked. Some shrugged. But John listened, and something ancient stirred in his soul, as though his very blood recognized the voice of destiny. They left their boats behind for the first time, traveling south, seeking the River Jordan. The journey was long and dusty, a trail carved through rocky hills and thorny paths. But they pressed on. Something called them. Not words, not promises, but a presence. A sense that the tides of the world were shifting. At the river, they saw him. John the Baptist stood waist-deep in the water, his voice thunderous, his eyes blazing. Crowds gathered like sheep seeking a shepherd, desperate for truth, for hope. And then, on a morning cloaked in mist and mystery, he appeared. Jesus of Nazareth. There was no trumpet, no earthquake, just a man stepping quietly into the water. But when the Baptist saw him, he trembled. "Behold," he cried, "the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." The sky cracked open. A dove descended, and a voice, unmistakable, eternal, spoke from the heavens. "This is my beloved Son." John's heart raced. His legs weakened. He had found the one he didn't even know he was searching for. From that moment, the younger son of Zebedee would never look back. He followed quietly at first, a shadow among shadows, observing every word, every miracle. He saw demons flee, lepers cleansed, blind men laugh with sight reborn. And with each step, his thunder grew, not in noise, but in conviction. Jesus called them Boanerges, sons of thunder, a name not of mockery, but of destiny. For he saw in them a storm yet to come, a fire not yet refined. John did not yet understand the full weight of the name. Not then, not while he still burned with ambition and pride. But the journey had begun, the sea behind him, the cross ahead, and in between 1,000 steps that would shape not just his soul, but the soul of the world. Chapter 2. Rivals at the right hand. The road to glory is seldom paved in gold. Sometimes it is laid with pride, with jealousy, with the silent sparks that flare between brothers. For even among those closest to the Messiah, ambition walked beside faith, and John, the youngest son of thunder, was not immune. As the 12 followed Jesus from town to town, through sun-scorched deserts and moonlit olive groves, Whispers bloomed among them. Who would be greatest? Who would sit beside the Master when the kingdom came? John had seen the miracles, heard the parables, felt the pulse of divine power in every word Jesus spoke. And in his heart he believed that he was different, chosen, not just to follow, but to rule. He wasn't alone. James, his brother, shared the dream. Together, they approached their mother, Salome, a woman of quiet resolve and burning loyalty. She too had glimpsed the coming kingdom in her heart and her son's place in it. So, one day, beneath the shade of fig trees outside Jericho, she stepped forward and knelt before the Nazarene. "Grant that my sons may sit, one at your right hand and one at your left, when you come into your glory." A silence followed, not of awe, but of reckoning. Jesus looked into her eyes, then into the eyes of the two brothers. There was no anger in his gaze, only a sorrowful knowing. "You do not know what you are asking," he said. "Can you drink the cup I am going to drink?" John straightened. His heart pounded with pride. "We can," he said without hesitation. James echoed the words. The teacher gave a faint, almost mournful smile. "You will indeed drink my cup," he said, "but to sit at my right or left is not mine to grant." The others were furious. The air thickened with unspoken accusations and wounded pride. Peter muttered under his breath. Bartholomew scowled. Even gentle Andrew's face hardened. Jealousy had crept in. A storm of ego swirled among the chosen. But Jesus, always the master of storms, stood and gathered them like sheep gone astray. "You know how the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. Not so with you. Whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant." The words struck like lightning in John's chest. Greatness, he realized, did not come from position, not from sitting beside the throne, but from standing at the foot of it, humble, unseen. That day, a seed was planted in John. It would not bloom overnight. Pride still lingered. Fire still burned. But now, there was another ember glowing deep within: love. Not ambition, not rivalry, but love. The kind of love that would one day redefine him. But first, the Son of Thunder had to walk through storms of his own making. Chapter 3: The Mountain of Glory. The wind howled like a voice from the deep as Jesus led three of his closest, Peter, James, and John, up the steep and lonely slopes of a mountain. The sky above was an ocean of burning stars, and the rocks beneath their feet whispered of ancient things. John, still young, still burning with unshaped fire, followed in silence, his heart thundering in his chest. Why had the Master chosen him? What was he about to reveal? Higher they climbed, until the world below vanished in shadow. And then, without warning, glory burst forth. It was not the rising of the sun, nor the flicker of firelight. It was light itself, raw, living radiance. Jesus stood before them, transfigured. His face shone like the sun. His garments blazed white as lightning. The very air trembled with the nearness of heaven. Beside him, two figures appeared: Moses, the lawgiver, and Elijah, the prophet of fire. They spoke with Jesus, their words cloaked in mystery, their voices like echoes from eternity. John fell to his knees, breath stolen by awe. This was no mere teacher, no prophet wandering Galilean paths. This was the Son of the living God, clothed in the power of the Most High. Peter babbled something about building shelters, but John could not speak. His spirit was unraveling, caught between terror and adoration. Then a cloud descended, not of mist, but of presence. A voice rolled through the mountain, deeper than thunder, clearer than water. "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." The mountain itself seemed to bow. John buried his face to the ground, shaken to the core. And yet, he felt no fear, only the overwhelming weight of truth. He had seen the veil lifted, touched eternity with his eyes. When he looked up again, the light had dimmed. Moses and Elijah were gone. Jesus stood alone, as before, no longer radiant, but still changed. They descended the mountain in silence, their hearts too full for words. But something had shifted in John. He had stood in the court of heaven. He had seen the Messiah, not as a man, but as the glorious King. And yet, the vision raised a deeper question in him. If such power lived within the Christ, why did he speak so often of suffering? It was a mystery John could not yet grasp. The mountain had shown him glory, but soon he would be led into the valley of shadows, where that glory would be tested by pain. For the path of the beloved disciple would not ascend in triumph, but descend through fire, betrayal, and blood. Chapter 4. The Samaritan Fire. The sun blazed mercilessly over the rocky hills of Samaria as dust clung to the robes of the disciples. Every village seemed to reject them. Doors shut, eyes averted, words laced with disdain. John walked beside his brother James, frustration building in his chest like a storm. They had come to prepare the way for the Master, but the Samaritans wanted nothing of it. As the heat pressed down and tempers flared, John's hand gripped the hilt of his belt dagger, not to draw it, but simply to feel the cold steel. He burned, with anger, with pride, with the need to defend the honor of the one they followed. Then he turned to Jesus and spoke the words that would echo for years. "Lord, do you want us to call down fire from heaven to consume them?" He meant it. He had seen Elijah do it. Why not now? Why should these enemies mock the Messiah and walk away unscathed? James stood ready beside him. The sons of thunder, together, with hearts full of righteous fury. But Jesus turned slowly. There was no fire in his eyes, only sorrow. "You do not know what spirit you are of," he said, his voice like a wind that quenches flames. "For the Son of Man did not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them." The words fell like cold water. John staggered back, shame pierced. He had thought himself brave, bold, loyal, but his heart had been closer to vengeance than to love. And that was not the way of the kingdom. That day, something broke inside John, and something else began to grow. A seed planted by rebuke, watered by humility. He had tasted the fire of wrath. Now he was called to know another fire, a Samaritan fire. One that burned not to destroy, but to illuminate, to purify, to transform. They left the village in silence, dust still thick on their feet. But in John, a deeper fire was lit, a fire that would not flash in fury, but smolder quietly, until in time it would become the very flame of love. He was still a son of thunder, but the thunder was beginning to echo from a different sky. Chapter 5. At the Master's Side. The night air of Capernaum shimmered with the sound of waves lapping against the shore. In the soft flicker of lamplight, John sat close, always close, to the Master. He didn't speak much now. He didn't need to. It was enough to be near. He had begun to notice things. The way Jesus' eyes scanned the crowds, searching for the forgotten. The way he touched the sick tenderly, as though each wound was his own. The way he prayed, fierce, weeping, like a man who wrestled with heaven. John watched and learned. He no longer longed to call down fire. He longed to understand this man, who held thunder in his voice, yet carried lambs in his arms. Each day, he leaned a little closer. At meals, he sat beside him. On the road, he walked in his shadow. Around campfires, he listened, not just to the words, but to the silences, the pauses, the sighs. John became the mirror, the one who reflected, who received. He asked the quiet questions. He noticed what others missed, and the Master saw him. There was a moment, barely remembered by the others, when Jesus had healed a child in the dark. Only John had been awake. He saw the tears Jesus wiped away from the mother's face. He saw the Master weep too. That night, something passed between them, not with words, but with presence. John was still young, still brimming with fire, but that fire was being reshaped, refined, reforged. He had no title, no special task. Others led, spoke, argued. But he remained, always at the Master's side. And there, in the quiet spaces of love and loyalty, he found his purpose, not in thunderous acts, but in steady devotion. He was the witness, the keeper of moments, the disciple whom Jesus loved. But John did not yet know what that love would cost. The shadow of something vast and coming lingered on the horizon, and he would face it, not with a sword, but with open hands and an unshakable heart. Chapter 6. The Betrayer and the Beloved. The upper room was cloaked in flickering lamplight, its stone walls whispering echoes of ancient prophecies. Outside, the city of Jerusalem murmured beneath the weight of Passover. Pilgrims filling the streets, priests preparing sacrifices, Roman guards watching from their towers. But within these walls, something greater was unfolding. John sat near the Master, always near. It was the place he had come to occupy not by authority nor age, but by the gravity of love. He, the youngest among them, burned with a silent devotion that bound him closer than blood. The meal had begun, humble and holy, but tension hung in the air like smoke from the Lamb's fire. Jesus spoke of service, of washing feet, of kingdoms upside down. Then his voice lowered. His eyes, deep as eternity, scanned the faces of his brothers. "One of you will betray me." It struck like lightning. Silence fell, thick, suffocating. Forks paused midair. Faces turned to one another, stunned, searching. Could it be Peter? Could it be Thomas? Could it be me? Peter, bold but shaken, gestured across the table to John. Ask him. Ask who he means. John leaned closer, resting his head on the chest of Christ, listening not just to the words, but to the very rhythm of the Messiah's heart. There was no fear in him, only sorrow, only the need to understand. The answer came, not in thunder, but in bread. Jesus dipped it and handed it to Judas. Their eyes met. Judas faltered for a breath, then rose, the shadows clinging to his robe like smoke. No words were exchanged. Only the door opened and shut, and with it the night deepened. But John remained. The table resumed, but the atmosphere had changed. Jesus began to speak, not of betrayal, but of love, raw, luminous, divine. He spoke of a new commandment, of laying down one's life, of vine and branches, of the Comforter to come. Others heard it as teaching. John received it as revelation. That night, Jesus poured himself out like living wine, and John drank deeply. He saw more than lessons. He saw a legacy. The trembling hand of God writing his final love letter through every word and gaze. He had seen Jesus transfigured in glory. Now he saw him transfigured in grief. Still, he did not look away. For while others burned with zeal, or fumbled in confusion, or braced themselves for the sword, John sat still and silent, anchored not by strength, but by affection. And Jesus, in the eye of the gathering storm, looked at him not as a boy, but as the one who would endure, the one who would stand at the foot of the cross, the one who would take in a mother, the one who would carry fire through the centuries. In that moment, amid betrayal and uncertainty, John was sealed, not just as follower or friend, but as the beloved. And in the language of heartbeats, he vowed to follow, not just to the garden or to Golgotha, but to the end of days. Chapter 7. The Shadow of the Cross. The moon hung low over Gethsemane, pale and veiled behind drifting clouds. The olive trees stood like ancient sentinels, their twisted branches whispering secrets of ages past. This was no ordinary garden. It was a battlefield dressed in silence. John followed his master into the night, heart pounding with an unease he could not name. Alongside Peter and James, he was chosen to go deeper, to stand closer, to watch. But even as Jesus moved further into the shadows, something in him had changed. The fire in his voice was now a flickering flame. "Stay here," Jesus said softly, "and watch with me." John nodded, but the night was heavy, soaked with sorrow. He watched as the Master knelt among the trees, his hands clutching the earth, his breath a prayer of agony. From where he sat, John could see him trembling. Jesus, the healer of lepers, the calmer of storms, now crushed by something unseen. He had witnessed miracles. He had stood on mountains of glory. But here, in the garden, John saw something more terrifying than death, the weight of destiny. And he fell asleep. When the Master returned, his face was lined with anguish, streaked with the sweat of blood. "Could you not watch with me 1 hour?" he asked, not in anger, but in a sorrow deeper than the grave. John's heart sank. He had failed, not with the sword, but with weariness. The beloved had slumbered when love demanded vigilance. But there was no time for regret. A flicker of torchlight danced through the trees. Soldiers, priests, Judas. The garden filled with the clamor of betrayal. Swords were drawn, voices raised. Chaos erupted like thunder from the silence. Peter struck. A servant screamed. Blood hit the earth. But Jesus, he raised his hands. No more of this. And as calmly as he had healed in Galilee, he touched the wounded ear and made it whole. John watched, stunned. This was not defeat. This was surrender, but of a different kind. Not of weakness, but of divine purpose. The shepherd laying down his life, not losing it. Then they seized him. John's heart warred with fear and loyalty. Should he run? Should he fight? But his feet moved, not away but after, into the night, into the danger. Only he and Peter followed. The others had scattered, lost in the dark. Through narrow alleys and stone corridors, John crept to the high priest's courtyard. His cloak pulled close, his heart in his throat. He found his way inside, unnoticed, unnamed, his presence cloaked by youth and boldness. He watched the trial unfold. False witnesses, twisted words, silent dignity, slaps, spit, mockery. John's fists clenched. How could the world not see? But the shadow of the cross was already falling, long and unrelenting. In that hour, John saw not just injustice, but the unfathomable resolve of the Lamb. A love that did not flinch, a truth that did not resist. A king who would conquer not by force, but by sacrifice. The night would grow darker, the cries louder, the blood deeper. But John stayed close. Because even as the world turned its face away from the suffering Messiah, John's eyes remained fixed, not on the horror, but on the hope hidden beneath it. For he knew this was not the end. Chapter 8. A new mother, a new mission. The weight of the night still pressed heavily upon the city, but within the walls of the crucifixion scene, a new chapter was quietly unfolding. One born not from thunder or violence, but from profound love and destiny. John stood near the foot of the cross, eyes fixed on his master's face, marked by agony, yet shining with an eternal light. Around him, the crowd murmured, some with jeers, others in silent horror. Yet, in that darkest moment, something remarkable took place, a moment that would ripple through history, forever changing the course of John's life and the lives of all who would come after. With a voice cracked by pain but filled with command, Jesus looked down from the cross and spoke words that stunned the watchers. Behold your mother. John's breath caught. The crowd's whispers faltered. Turning, John saw Mary, his mother's eyes full of tears, but unwavering in faith. She stood there, vulnerable yet strong, a symbol of enduring love amidst the chaos of death. Jesus' gaze locked with John's, and in that gaze lay a profound charge. John was no longer just a disciple or a follower. In that instant, he became a son to Mary, the mother of Jesus. The shift was seismic. John, the youngest of the apostles, the fiery son of thunder, now bore a new mantle, protector of the mother of the Messiah. This was no small task. It was a mission of quiet strength, loyalty, and unyielding devotion. As the sky darkened and the earth trembled beneath the weight of the crucifixion, John cradled Mary's grief and fear. He became her shield, her companion, her unwavering presence. But more than that, John understood this was a beginning, not an end. A call to carry forward the mission that Jesus had poured his life into, the spreading of a message of love, hope, and redemption. The cross, a symbol of sacrifice, now transformed into a beacon of new life. In the days that followed, John would emerge from the shadow of the cross with a purpose sharper than any sword. He would become the apostle of love, the bearer of the message that would ignite hearts across continents and centuries. From the quiet streets of Jerusalem to the distant shores of Ephesus, John's voice would carry the flame kindled by Jesus, an eternal fire of compassion and truth. And as he stood there, holding the mother of the Savior, John understood that his path was no longer his own. It belonged to a greater story, a story of faith forged in the crucible of sacrifice and of a mission that would echo through the ages. John, the son of thunder, had been reborn, not in power or storms, but in love. Chapter 9. The Empty Tomb. The dawn broke over the hills of Jerusalem with a restless whisper, as if the earth itself held its breath. The city, still shrouded in grief and silence from the crucifixion, was about to witness a moment that would shatter despair and ignite a fire of hope unlike any before. John, along with the other disciples, moved quietly through the morning mist toward the tomb where their master had been laid. The air was heavy with sorrow, their hearts weighed down by the finality of death, or so they believed. As they approached, John's eyes caught sight of the stone, a massive, unyielding barrier that sealed the tomb shut. Yet something was different. The stone had been rolled away. A shock of disbelief rippled through the group. The tomb was open, empty. John's heart pounded fiercely as he raced ahead, his feet barely touching the ground. The world seemed to slow, every breath a thunderous echo in his ears. Inside the hollowed cave, the linens that once wrapped Jesus' body lay folded, untouched by decay or theft. The silence was profound, but it carried a message more powerful than any words. He saw it clearly. The grave could not hold the one who commanded the winds and calmed the seas. The emptiness was not a void, but a promise, a declaration that death had been conquered, that the light of resurrection now blazed beyond the shadows of the tomb. John turned to the others, eyes wide with awe and disbelief. "He has risen." The words trembled on his lips, yet they carried the certainty of a new dawn. This was not merely the end of a life. It was the birth of a new covenant, a triumphant roar that echoed through heaven and earth. The news spread like wildfire, carried by the breathless disciples who became messengers of hope. Across villages and cities, the story of the empty tomb stirred hearts and sparked faith. For John, the empty tomb was a revelation that transformed him completely. The son of thunder, once fiery and bold, was now tempered with the quiet strength of faith renewed. He understood that his journey was far from over. The resurrection was the spark that would ignite the flame of the gospel, a flame he was destined to carry, to protect, and to share with the world. In the silence of that empty tomb, a thunderous truth resounded. Life triumphs over death, hope over despair, love over all. Chapter 10. Fishing at Dawn. The sun had barely begun to pierce the horizon, casting a pale golden light over the tranquil Sea of Galilee. The early morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of salt and the promise of a new day. Yet beneath this calm surface, the hearts of the disciples were restless and uncertain. John, alongside a handful of others, took to their boats, casting nets into the water as they had done countless times before. But this time, the nets came up empty. Time and again, the sea refused to give its bounty. Fatigue weighed on them, not just in their limbs but in their souls. The loss of their teacher, the shock of the resurrection, and the overwhelming uncertainty of what was to come left them adrift, searching for meaning in the familiar rhythms of their old lives. And then, from the shore, a voice called out, a voice both gentle and commanding. "Cast your net on the right side of the boat," it said. John squinted through the morning light. It was Jesus. Though his heart leapt with recognition, doubt flickered as well. Yet, obedient and hopeful, they threw their nets once more into the sea. This time, the catch was miraculous. So many fish it strained the nets, threatening to tear them asunder. The boats, heavy with their haul, nearly began to sink under the weight of abundance. A wave of joy and amazement surged through John's veins. This was more than a simple catch. It was a sign, a reminder of their master's enduring power and love. Jesus stepped onto the shore, already tending a fire where fish sizzled, ready to be shared. The scene was simple yet sacred. Fishermen gathered around the flame, united again by the call of their risen Lord. John felt a fire rekindling in his chest, a renewed purpose and a deep sense of belonging. This was no ordinary dawn. It was the dawn of a new mission. from the waters of Galilee. They would be sent out to cast the nets of faith far and wide, gathering souls into the kingdom that now stretched beyond death and despair. Fishing at dawn was not just a return to their past, but a bold step toward the future, a future shaped by courage, by love, and by the unwavering call of the Son of Thunder. Chapter 11. The Fire of Pentecost. The days after the resurrection were filled with a restless anticipation. The disciples, once scattered and fearful, now gathered together in a small upper room in Jerusalem. Their hearts beat with a mixture of hope and uncertainty, waiting for the promise Jesus had spoken of, the coming of the Holy Spirit. Among them stood John, the son of thunder, whose spirit burned with a quiet but fierce fire. He had witnessed miracles, betrayals, and the crucifixion itself. Now, he stood at the precipice of a new beginning, feeling the weight of the mission that lay ahead. Suddenly, the room was shaken by a powerful, rushing wind that swept through the chambers and rattled the very foundations of the house. It was no ordinary wind. It was the breath of heaven itself, announcing a profound and eternal change. Then, flames of fire appeared, resting like tongues upon each disciple's head. But these flames did not burn flesh or consume wood. Instead, they ignited a divine power within, filling them with courage, wisdom, and an unshakable boldness. John could feel the fire coursing through his veins, awakening the storm within him. The very same thunder that had roared on Galilee's seas now echoed inside his soul, calling him to rise and proclaim a message that would shake the earth. With newfound strength, the disciples poured out into the streets of Jerusalem, speaking in tongues and languages foreign yet understood by all who listened. The crowd, drawn from every corner of the known world, was captivated. The message of salvation, hope, and the kingdom of God rang loud and clear. John's voice thundered like a celestial storm, his words carrying the weight of divine authority and unyielding love. The fire that had once burned silently within him now blazed openly, lighting the hearts of those ready to hear the gospel. The fire of Pentecost was not merely a moment in time. It was the birth of a movement destined to reshape history. The flame kindled in that upper room spread like wildfire across nations, generations, and cultures, igniting faith in the hearts of millions. For John, the son of thunder, Pentecost was a transformation. From a quiet follower to a blazing apostle, he embraced the sacred fire that would carry his voice across centuries. The silent flame of his early journey was now an inferno of divine purpose. From that day forward, the world was forever changed, set ablaze by the power and passion of the Holy Spirit. Chapter 12. Before the Sanhedrin. The rising dawn cast long shadows over the ancient stones of Jerusalem as John stood before the Sanhedrin, the powerful council of elders and priests who held the fate of many in their hands. The air was thick with tension, charged by years of fear, suspicion, and growing opposition to the new movement of believers. John, once a fiery youth whose voice could roar like thunder, now faced a tribunal that sought to silence him forever. But beneath his calm exterior, a tempest raged, an unyielding conviction forged in the fires of faith and countless trials. The leaders questioned him sharply, their voices heavy with accusation and scorn. By what power do you preach? Who has given you this authority to speak of Jesus and his resurrection? John's gaze did not falter. In his eyes blazed the light of truth and the unshakable certainty of a man who had seen the risen Christ. It is by the Spirit of the living God, he declared, that I stand here. The same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead dwells in me, and through him I speak. The council murmured in disbelief and anger, their ancient halls echoing with the clashing of old laws and new faith. Yet John's fearless testimony pierced through the opposition like a thunderbolt. He recounted the miracles, the teachings, and the love he had witnessed firsthand. He spoke of the empty tomb and the promise of eternal life. His words carried the weight of divine authority, shaking the foundations of the religious order. But the Sanhedrin was unyielding. They condemned him, seeking to suppress the growing flame of the Christian message. Yet, even as they threatened, John's spirit was unbroken, for he knew this trial was but a chapter in a greater story, one written by the hand of God himself. Stepping out of the shadowed council chambers, John felt the eyes of the city upon him, some filled with fear, others with hope. The path ahead was perilous, marked by imprisonment and hardship, but also by the unstoppable spread of a faith that would not be extinguished. Before the Sanhedrin, John's courage became legend. The Son of Thunder had faced the storm of human judgment and emerged a beacon of light, ready to carry the message of love and salvation to the farthest corners of the earth. Chapter 13. The Years of Silence. After the fierce trials before the Sanhedrin and the blazing days of Pentecost, a quieter, more mysterious chapter unfolded in John's life, a time often called the Years of Silence. Though the world around him buzzed with turmoil, his voice seemed to fade into the shadows, leaving a hush over his journey. But beneath that stillness, a storm brewed within, a tempest of reflection, revelation, and preparation. John retreated from the clamor of the crowds and the dangerous intrigues of the city, seeking refuge in solitude and prayer. It was a time when the noise of the world was silenced, and the voice within grew louder than ever. In caves, on mountain tops, and along the tranquil shores of distant seas, he wrestled with visions and divine mysteries that few could understand. The silence was not empty. It was filled with the whispered secrets of the heavens. John's soul was attuned to celestial revelations, glimpses of the eternal battle between light and darkness. Here, he saw the destiny of the church unfold like an epic tapestry, every thread woven by divine hands. Though physically withdrawn, John's spirit soared higher than ever before. The fierce apostle, once known for thunderous words and fiery zeal, now carried the weight of prophetic insight, knowledge that would shape the course of history and faith for generations to come. The years of silence forged John into more than a disciple. They made him a seer, a guardian of sacred truth. It was in these quiet moments that he prepared for his greatest role, not just as a preacher or martyr, but as the beloved apostle who would write the visions of heaven and reveal the mysteries of the apocalypse. The world outside raged on. Empire clashed with empire, heresies rose, and believers were scattered like seeds in the wind. Yet, John remained steadfast, his silence a powerful testament of endurance and unwavering faith. Though unseen by many, this hidden chapter was a crucible, shaping the man who would become the voice of love, the chronicler of eternal hope, and the Son of Thunder who learned to wield not just words of fire, but the deep, calm power of silence. Chapter 14. Visions on the Island. Exiled to the rugged, windswept island of Patmos, John faced what many would see as a bleak and lonely punishment. But for John, the silence and isolation were the very conditions for a greater awakening. Removed from the distractions of the world, he was thrust into the heart of a celestial encounter that would forever alter the course of history. The island's jagged cliffs rose sharply against the vast expanse of sky and sea, their wildness echoing the turmoil inside John's soul. Yet in this harsh solitude, a divine presence enveloped him. Vivid visions unfolded like a cosmic tapestry, painting scenes of heaven and earth in breathtaking detail. Under the cloak of night, the sky above Patmos ignited with ethereal light. John saw a throne surrounded by radiant elders and blazing angels, their voices rolling like thunder and their faces shining with the brilliance of 1,000 suns. The air itself seemed to pulse with the power of the Almighty. In his visions, John witnessed the opening of a mysterious scroll sealed with 7 seals, each one unlocking a new chapter of prophecy and portent. With each seal broken, the earth trembled as plagues, wars, and natural disasters swept across the land, heralding times of great trial and upheaval. But amid the chaos, John saw the Lamb, majestic and pure, who alone was worthy to break the seals and bring about the final redemption. The scenes that followed were both terrifying and hopeful. The four horsemen riding out to challenge the world's darkness, the cries of the martyrs rising like incense, and the ultimate victory of light over shadow. These revelations were not mere images. They were a sacred call to courage and faith for the weary and oppressed. John's pen captured these apocalyptic visions with trembling hands, as if the words themselves were charged with divine fire. Day after day, the island's silence bore witness to this celestial drama. The crashing waves and howling winds were the chorus to a heavenly symphony of prophecy, a message to all generations of believers facing trials and tribulations. Though cut off from the world, John's spirit soared across time and space. His visions became a beacon of hope and a warning, a map guiding humanity through the storms of history toward the dawn of a new, eternal kingdom. In exile, John transformed from humble apostle into the prophet of the apocalypse. His revelations echo through the ages, a thunderous voice from the island that changed everything. Chapter 15, The Apostle of Love. As the years passed beyond exile and visions, John emerged not just as a witness of apocalyptic revelations, but as the Apostle of Love, a title earned through unwavering devotion, courage, and a heart transformed by the very essence of Christ. John's journey had been one of fire and thunder, but it was love that forged his final legacy. From the fiery words of his youth to the serene wisdom of his elder years, he carried a message unlike any other, a call to love one another with the purest, most unyielding devotion. In the twilight of his life, John traveled tirelessly, spreading the gospel not through force, but through compassion and grace. His letters, filled with fervent appeals to embrace love as the greatest commandment, became the foundation for countless believers seeking light in dark times. Despite threats, persecution, and the shadow of death, John remained steadfast. His faith was a beacon that outshone fear, a lighthouse guiding the lost and the broken toward redemption. His gentle but resolute spirit inspired generations, reminding all that true strength lies in love's enduring power. John's story closes not with grand battles or thunderous proclamations, but with a quiet, unshakable conviction that love is the ultimate force to heal, unite, and transform the world. This is the legacy of John, the son of thunder turned apostle of love, a journey from fiery youth to eternal peace, echoing through time as a testament to faith's greatest gift. As the final light fades on the extraordinary life of John, the apostle of love, we are reminded that his message transcends time, a call to embrace compassion, courage, and unwavering faith. His story teaches us that amidst trials and triumphs, love remains the eternal flame that guides us all. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through the life of John. If you've been inspired by his story, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel to continue exploring the epic tales of the apostles. May the spirit of love and faith remain with you always.